Can anybody find me a podcast to love? Hello, everyone out there, all our lovely fans, all our beautiful listeners. My name is Wyatt.
And I'm Rhett.
And you are here with the Brower Brothers. Oh, yes.
One thing we like to do on our show is talk about movies.
Yeah, they're our favorite. But that's not all we do. We don't just talk about movies. We also like to come up with the sequel to movies and write scenes from this fictitious sequel.
We love movies, but the only thing we love better than a movie is that same movie's sequel.
The second installment is always better. Everyone knows that.
Everyone says. And what movie are we talking about today, Wyatt?
Well, Rhett, that's a great question. We are talking about the 2003 epic, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
That's a great movie, Wyatt.
You know, it's easy to say. It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, everyone knows exactly what you're talking about when you say The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
And you're expecting that it's all men in that cast, but you'd be mistaken.
You would be wrong.
There's also a gentle woman in the cast.
To give a brief overview of what the movie is, it's a bunch of characters from books teaming up together in a movie.
It was a grand idea to mix classic literature with modern heroes to form an ultimate team of crime fighters to ruin 8th grade.
I mean, the movie was a mess.
From top to bottom, from start to finish, this movie was it wasn't all that it wanted to be, is how I'd describe it. It stars Sean Connery, the late great Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm. Sir Sean Connery, right?
It is Sir Sean Connery.
Sir Sean Connery. And pretty much no one else notable.
People that you've never heard before or will never see again.
I think this movie not only killed a franchise, I think it killed a lot of people's careers.
Yeah, and yeah.
Most notably, it ended Sean Connery's career.
That's very true. Among a bunch of other issues that occurred on set and just within the plot of the movie, Sean Connery and the director of this film both quit filmmaking after the release of this movie because of all sorts of problematic occurrences, including a theorized fist fight between the two of them on set.
Between the director and Sean Connery?
Oh, they hated each other. It was apparently a nightmare with the two of them. They were always at each other's throats. They were arguing about the plot of the movie. I don't know if either one realized how bad it came off anyway.
There should not have been a fight because one of them made the movie watchable and the other one was the director.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think, who was the director? Did he direct anything else? I know that the original comic book that this is based off of was written by the guy who did Blade. And did he direct it? The director of Blade?
No, the guy that wrote the comic book apparently he hated the idea of it being a movie. He never wanted them to make it. He hated it from the start. He may have never even seen the movie when it came out.
Really?
Some say that he watched it and hated it. Others say he never even bothered to go.
He boycotted it?
Yeah, he did not like
I'm trying to think of any of these. It's based off of how many different books? It's based off of, well, Tom Sawyer is a main character, so that's one book. The secondary character in Dracula is one of the main cast members. The Invisible Man.
Yep.
Alan Quatermain, who I'd never even heard of.
There's like a 12-book series about Alan Quatermain. It's basically Indiana Jones.
Yeah, okay, I have heard of that because Indiana Jones loosely based off of Alan Quatermain, potentially.
Yeah, he's like the OG hat-wearing safari archaeologist guy that goes on adventures and discovers stuff and temples and stuff.
But like, none of these characters...
Did you already mention Dorian Gray?
Dorian Gray.
I believe the villain is based off of the Phantom of the Opera. And there's all sorts of references throughout, including one just thrown in a one-liner about the guy that goes around the world in 80 days, Phineas Fogg.
Did they mention him in the first one?
They do in one half second.
Well,
they mention him.
What do you think of that?
How do you do?
But what I'm driving at is none of these characters have had a successful movie made from these stories.
No, it's
Not one
all books.
successful movies. But no, even the ones that have had movies made were not good movies.
No, they weren't something that people were rushing back to see again.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me how often Dracula is remade. And this wasn't even following Dracula. It was Mina Harker, who was just one of the gals in the story.
Yeah.
She's a vampire.
She is a vampire. That's her power.
As always with things such as this, spoilers are ahead. We're about to really go in depth about this movie. It's several pages.
Yeah.
So hold on to your hats. This is The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It is the year 1899. The world is teetering on the edge of a great change in the form of industrialism and war. While horse and buggy still line the streets, the introduction of motorized vehicles are vastly altering the way people conduct their everyday lives. Though there has been peace on the European continent for quite some time, there is a thick tension in the foggy London air, and the stench of conflict grows stronger each day.
We open on a quiet street in Berlin, where constables patrol the city, assuring its safety. They, however, are unable to keep the peace as a large, building-destroying tank, something they have never seen before, rolls up and slaps them around. Pilot of this vessel, a masked man known simply as the Phantom, invades a laboratory full of blimps and scientists, opening fire on the inhabitants and blowing shit up. The Phantom leaves, but his mark remains. News tabloids sing the songs of war, blaming the attack on the British, seemingly sparking a potential combative entanglement.
Just for you viewers out there, Phantom is actually spelled with an F in this case, assuring you that he is very evil.
Yeah. And they really hammed up that people had never seen technology like this before because the police were beating the tank with their batons.
Yeah, they had the nightsticks. They were blowing on their whistles and hitting it with the sticks. It was as if it showed up with in the caveman times.
Yeah.
Across the globe in the land of Kenya, a man makes his way to a secluded man cave, home to a great deal of huntsmen. One of those, the man he is there to see, is the legendary Alan Quatermain, played by Sean Connery. Quatermain is an ex-representative of the Crown, a once patriot, and a skilled marksman and explorer. His work in many ways changed the world, but he has since turned his back on it, choosing to hang out in Africa instead. The man who has come to see him, however, is on a mission to persuade him out of seclusion and back into the fold, as the world is in desperate need of Alan Quatermain's special abilities. Before he can kick this man out, a platoon of armor-wearing jabronis show up and attempt to assassinate Quatermain and his potential employer. It is a wild fight, with the then 71-year-old Sean Connery kicking all sorts of ass and being a real boss. His gunnery skills, however, are only partially displayed as the assassin's plate armor is bulletproof, leading Quatermain to beat them with tables, chairs, and even impaling one with a decorative rhino horn. Convinced that there is something awry, Quatermain decides to leave his new home in Africa and venture back to the land of the Crown.
Honestly, this opening fight scene was pretty good.
It set a really cool precedent for what was to come in the movie, and Sean Connery is he's like Chris Farley in Beverly Hills Ninja, throwing all sorts of punches and kicks that you're not going to expect from that man.
Yeah, how old was he when this filmed?
71.
Yeah, he was 71. In his 70s.
He was well old enough. He had a white beard, and he was like jumping up and doing sparrow kicks. He lifted a guy up and threw him through a rhino horn that was on the wall. He didn't even take the rhino horn and stab him.
He lifted the guy up with a table and
Yes.
charged him all the way across this seemingly endless hallway and stuck the guy on the wall like a dart.
And the guy was wearing armor.
Yeah.
So he threw that man with so much force that this bone went through his steel plate armor, which was just deflecting bullets a second ago.
Yeah.
And it went through the back and the front.
He beat that same guy. He beat up one guy with like 3 tables.
It seemed like a comedy sketch. He kept picking up like china cabinets and tables and smashing it over this guy's head. And then he'd go fight his friends. And then that guy would show back up and he'd get hit with another table.
With another table. Yeah, he picked up a table and like a glass top table and trapped the guy inside the frame. And the guy had to wiggle out of it.
He was in a glass case of emotion.
He was. Upon his arrival in England, Quatermain learns the nature of his invitation and is introduced to the other members of this up-and-coming group, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Among the crew, there is the famous Captain Nemo, owner of the glorious Nautilus and the possessor of great wealth. Next, he meets Rodney Skinner, known for his quick wit, his love for sexual assault, and his constant invisibility. A freak accident that forces him to paint his face white. Next, Quartermain is introduced to Mina Harker, an ex-English aristocrat who, after a run-in with a Transylvanian count, is now cursed with the abilities of a vampire. Quartermain is not too keen about the presence of a woman on the team and goes to great lengths to let her know that. The organizer of this group, a man known as M, tells them that a great world war is coming, and the Phantom is trying to incite it. Only these extraordinary people can stop him, but there are still a few more people that they must become acquainted with first. There was never a world war yet.
No, this was pure speculation. This was more of a prediction than anything else.
But like World War One, before it was called World War One, it was called the Great War.
Yeah, that is true. And he was referring to it as a world war.
Yeah.
He was like, a world war is on the horizon.
The concept of a world war wasn't even a thing.
No, it was something that had never been seen before. And it's even weirder that he used the word world war, because the opening sequence, there's like a bunch of words, it's like setting the scene, and they made sure to talk about specifically the specifically the European continent.
Mm-hmm.
So they're only concerned with a European war, but then he's like, nah, world war. And only you dudes can stop it.
And Sean Connery was truly pissed to see a woman.
Oh, he was just enraged.
In Sean Connery fashion.
What was it that he said? He said something, this better be his wife coming with a sick note.
Yeah.
He was like so mad. He was like, oh, a woman is only a distraction in a situation such as this. Like, he was so mad.
Which is not unlike Sean Connery's actual opinions of women.
No, look up Sean Connery slapping women on YouTube, and you'll hear how he feels about that.
Doesn't he believe that you should be allowed to hit your wife?
I don't think it's a good thing. But he does think that you should be allowed to. One would agree that when she was being a real bitch, she had it coming with my ring hand. I mean, also, he slapped the shit out of women as James Bond all the time. He was like, he might not have had the most movies. He might not have had the most kills as a James Bond. But he definitely had the most lady slaps.
Yeah, no other James Bond slapped women more than Sean Connery.
Undisputed champion of slapping women in the Bond films. Heading across town, the group is introduced with another member of this new team, a handsome young man by the name of Dorian Gray. He is arrogant and condescending. It is clear that he has had a romantic relationship with Mina Harker. And in spite of his youthful appearance, it is alluded to that he is even older than the elderly Quartermain. Upon their visit to Dorian Gray, the group is attacked by a crew of jabronis, with the Phantom even making an appearance as well. The crew is truly ambushed, their efforts seemingly for naught. That is until one of the evil henchmen weirdly winks at Alan Quartermain. Sending shots at the villains and pulling his mask from his face, the strange hero fights alongside the League as they vanquish their enemies, that is except for the Phantom, who conveniently makes a grand escape. This hero happens to be none other than Tom Sawyer, a special agent and a spy for the American government. You heard that right. Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, and when he rips off his mask, you're just supposed to know. Like, it was a grand reveal, maybe with even like a little crescendo, doo-doo-doo. Like, they would like be like, oh, everyone's going to know this is Tom Sawyer.
They're just going to look at him and they're going to know. I have a question, Rhett. It's been a while since I've dabbled in Mark Twain. But was there ever a chapter where Tom Sawyer was hanging out with the neighborhood kids, having them paint the fence, and they're like, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he's like, I want to be a special agent for the United States government.
I don't know. I don't remember any of Tom Sawyer's wants or desires.
I don't think that was one of them, at least not explicitly written. I don't think that was one of them.
I remember Huckleberry Finn more. And why wasn't it Huck Finn? Why, like...
I guess Tom Sawyer made more sense in terms of this story.
He's a more marketable character as a special agent.
I have some opinions on Dorian Gray as well. I don't know how many of you guys have read the book or looked into the book or what it has stood for significantly for the past few hundred years. Dorian Gray should not have dated Mina Harker. They did not have the balls in 2003 to make Dorian Gray gay. And if you read the book, Dorian Gray dates a woman. He does. He dates a woman. He falls in love with a woman. But even in the book, it is like a shallow facade. He falls out of love with her instantly. And I think it's alluded to because he's gay. He even has like this whole little thing where somebody tries to blackmail him for having relationships with men. He's a gay man. But instead, they have him be in love with the vampire girl. It doesn't make sense. It's as ridiculous in this movie as it was in the book when he dated a woman. That's my piece.
Oscar Wilde had the balls to make Dorian Gray gay.
Yeah, and it was like really illegal back then. Even Oscar Wilde made Dorian Gray more gay than the directors did in this movie. And they wouldn't have been imprisoned for it. And Dorian Gray was just like, yeah, I'm going to say it. And that's why the book was...
Oscar Wilde?
Yeah, sorry.
Dorian Gray. In the movie, he wouldn't say it.
Dorian Gray would not say it in the movie. He kept that under wraps. But yeah, moral of that story is Dorian Gray's gay, and it was absurd throughout the entire movie when he was dating Mina Harker.
I think if they remake the movie, they're going to lean hard into that.
Yeah, I would hope so. It makes more sense. And also,
it's more true to the characters.
It is
of
more
the
true
books.
to the character. I mean, sure, make Tom Sawyer a special agent. That's stupid. But at least keep Dorian Gray gay if you're going to do it. And also, Mina Harker has a husband.
They did not stay true to the characters. At least 25% of them so far.
Why even do it? Why even have them be book characters if you're not going to use the book stuff?
The rivalry between the League and the Phantom is getting personal, and they are running out of time. So, heading to Paris, they find the last member of their crew, a hellish beast in a top hat, standing around 8 feet tall and with arms like elephants. Mr. Hyde is captured by the crew. Offered amnesty by the Crown for his crimes, Mr. Hyde and his alter ego, Dr. Jekyll, join the team, hoping to bring some good to the world for a change. This is a character that I really don't. They did not do a good job with this character at all.
With Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde?
Yeah, parts of him they really did. Actually, this is a very complicated character for me. Did you specifically the big giant hat that Mr. Hyde wears?
Who made that hat for him?
Exactly, because he clearly didn't. He didn't have a change of clothes. His clothes were all ripped to hell because he just would turn into Mr. Hyde. Another thing, he could control when he turned into Mr. Hyde. He drank the serum to turn into Mr. Hyde, but he would drink it and then turn into this rage monster who did not have any other clothes except his custom-made top hat because none of his clothes fit him except this huge top hat.
Yeah, there was Dorian Gray holds it up at one point and it's like supposed to be a joke, I think. But given the relevance and the significance of Mr. Hyde, who had to flee England because of how wanted and evil he was, who the hell made him the hat?
Yeah.
Who's going to support him? Oh, man, you got he has a weird looking head. Mr. Hyde has a weird head. So it's good that somebody covered it. But at the same time, why make that hat?
A lot didn't make sense about the beginning of his character. I think he was a good character. I think he was one of the best characters in the movie.
He evolved into a good one for sure.
At the beginning, they capture him in a net like he's an animal. And then that is quickly forgotten. Then Mr. Hyde is a functional member of the group. Mr. Hyde actually saves everybody later on.
Mm-hmm.
Multiple times.
He's more of a hero than some of the others throughout the story.
Yeah.
On board the Nautilus, the League makes their way to Venice, the place that the Phantom is said to be attacking next. The vessel is incredible and makes the voyage in just 3 days' time, a speed unimaginable for the time. On board the ship, some tension begins to build. The Invisible Man, a known thief, gets on people's nerves. Dr. Jekyll speaks to Mr. Hyde in mirrors and windows of the ship, the evil Hyde begging to be let out of his internal prison to cause mayhem. It is also revealed in passing that Dr. Jekyll might have a thing for Mina Harker as he creepily watches her and Dorian Gray get it on. As this is happening, Tom Sawyer and Alan Quatermain hit it off, bonding over guns and shooting, and that's about it. Quatermain teaches Sawyer how to shoot the British way, until Sawyer compares himself to Quatermain's dead son, ruining the moment. There's a potential saboteur in the crew's midst, as a mystery substance appears on the bridge of the Nautilus, and one of Dr. Jekyll's potions goes missing. Everyone assumes it's the Invisible Man.
This scene is oddly familiar to...
Another piece of fiction.
Yeah.
I will say...
The whole beginning of this movie, I will say, is very similar
it's reminiscent of... It feels familiar, guys. It feels familiar because it is. Let's break it down. Let's break down structure-wise what's going on here. We're assembling a crew of fantastic people. We have an old man who is being forcefully pulled out of retirement, an unknown patriot who has led the world several times before. His skills are unmatched. Everyone knows him as this hero, but he has lost people and he's unsure if he knows how to navigate the modern world. We have a tech baron who's the possessor of all this money. He's super rich. He has all this technology, and he earned that money through less than honest means, perhaps even profiting off of the misery of others. We have a red-headed woman who kicks all sorts of ass for the crew. She's underestimated by the rest of the crew and has to constantly prove herself throughout the opening act of the movie. We have an arrogant, self-absorbed man blessed with immortality and near vulnerability. We then have a spy known for his sharpshooting abilities, and finally, a scientist who has mistakenly introduced himself to chemicals that occasionally transform him into a giant rampaging monster. This is the Avengers.
The whole thing.
The whole thing is the Avengers. The Avengers took every piece of this story. But
right down to the boat.
Right down to the boat. The Nautilus, which, by the way, we haven't described yet, is ridiculous. It's this 4-mile long submarine that also is like just can shoot across the top of the water and has all sorts of crazy shit. Like
it doesn't make sense at all, and it's inconsistently big. Sometimes it's monstrously big, and sometimes it's small enough to fit down the streets of Venice.
Yeah, just down a river. And it also has all sorts of just built-in weapons, like the net that they caught Mr. Hyde with was just like it opened up a port and shot like Spider-Man and pulled him in. It's just ridiculous. The Nautilus is ridiculous, but it's like the helicarrier in the first Avengers movie. And just like the first Avengers movie, they are trapped on it and start to get on each other's nerves because of the mission at hand.
And just like the Avengers movie, it's revealed later by the villains that was the plan all along.
Yeah, that's what they made every step that the villain wanted them to make, which is exactly what Loki does too.
Yeah, to get him on the boat, to get Hyde, or actually, to get Hulk, but in this case, Hyde to turn into a giant rage monster.
The only thing that I'd say is different between the structure of these movies is that the depiction between the relationship of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is actually better than Bruce Banner and the Hulk.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. They did a good job with Hyde for some of it, because like when he would look in the mirror, when Dr. Jekyll would look in the mirror, he would see Mr. Hyde.
And Hyde is just talking in his head all the time.
It was very Gollum and Smeagol.
Yes. Oh, it's good you bring that up. Sean Connery actually turned down the role of Gandalf the Grey to be in this movie. He turned down arguably the best trilogy in history because he, quote, didn't get it.
But he got this.
He was like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. He must have read the books.
Well, yeah, a lot of these books are required to read, especially for that age group.
It was probably one of the worst Hollywood blunders in history.
Yeah, but it is responsible for great things in Hollywood.
It's responsible for greatness, and all things considered, the first act of this movie is good.
Yeah, the first act is good. It's goofy, but it's fine. And I don't think Sean Connery would have been as good at Gandalf, personally.
No, but it's kind of interesting to think that Sir Ian McKellen kind of does a Sean Connery voice when he plays Gandalf.
That's true.
Oh, it was a hobbit.
I never noticed that.
It's pretty much just as like.
Do you think Sean Connery would have grew his hair out really long though?
I don't know if it would have looked as good.
It would have looked weird.
Sir Ian McKellen is a king. He did great in that role. Sean Connery's a king.
True.
Two kings. He would have been a better Saruman. Maybe not better than the guy that they got, but I think he would have been better at Saruman than Gandalf.
Maybe. Well, I don't like to picture him as either of them.
He's just not a wizard.
He's not a wizard. He is, however, Alan Quatermain.
He for sure is Alan Quatermain. No one could portray him better.
We arrive in Venice on the night of a festival. The Nautilus, though at least a mile long, is able to easily navigate the channels, Captain Nemo confidently pulling it into the center of the city with no issues. This was stupid. When they pulled this into the city.
Not only did they pull straight in, they were making turns, just navigating perfectly. This thing, guys, I don't want to exaggerate. It was the size of the Empire State Building.
It was huge. When they originally showed it, he lifted his hands up like Night King did to raise the dead, and this thing emerged from the water, like right next to a dock, and it went like 100 feet in the air. Like it was so friggin' big.
And also, didn't we do some research? How deep were the channels in Venice?
They averaged like 6 feet deep.
And this thing is gargantuan. Not only is it as long as the building, it's as tall as most. It's taller than most buildings in America.
Yeah, it's so big, and yeah, it didn't make
Modern America.
Yeah, it did not make sense at all.
Just absurd. There are bombs hidden beneath the streets, under the water, and the crew must find a way to prevent the attack from happening. They inevitably fail, and explosions begin, disrupting the festival. Most of the League, except for Captain Nemo, who stays on the ship, Dr. Jekyll, who refuses to become Mr. Hyde and thus invalidates his own purpose of being there, and the Invisible Man, who is not present for a good chunk of the movie, climb into Nemo's epic car and start driving through the streets of Venice. There's a wild battle showcasing more of the hero's abilities, such as Mina Harker flying and conjuring bats, Dorian Gray being able to withstand machine gun fire, the bullet wounds healing instantly, and the two sharpshooters doing all sorts of sharpshooting. Quartermain begins to pursue the Phantom on foot as Tom Sawyer drives the car, doing a wicked stunt over a collapsing bridge and firing a flare gun into the air as he does so. This was the signal that Captain Nemo was waiting for before sending out a self-guided ballistic missile into a building for reasons unknown.
Yeah, that was so dumb too.
This whole scene is confusing to me.
I don't understand why they're in Venice at all.
No, I know that the Phantom wants to just cause disruption, I guess. Maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. But he's blowing up buildings, and for some reason, they stop the buildings blowing up by shooting a missile into another building. And it's 1899. There aren't missiles like that. I mean, like, there are things that resemble missiles. Like, there's projectiles at this point. But this was like a heat-seeking guided missile. Like, it shot up into orbit and came back down.
And also, hold on.
And they were calling it a torpedo first, which that would have made more sense. They were on a fucking boat to shoot a torpedo through the Venice channels, but no, they shot a warhead. It went straight up into the air and came back down, and it went like up into space and back down.
So in the movie, yeah, I'm glad that I found this. He's driving. Captain Nemo has a car. He not only has the Nautilus, he has a car. It was made specifically for the movie. It's 24 feet long and has 6 wheels, which Avengers stole that too.
Yeah, that's what Red Skull drives.
That's Red Skull's car. And this movie is set in 1899. The only cars that have been invented are absurd. They're like, the Model T was invented in 1908, which means that these cars are sub Model T quality.
Yeah, they're like the rickety, like, shaky cars that you see in cartoons.
I think they were designed specifically so you could still have a horse pull it. So this guy has the Batmobile driving all around the city.
That's pretty much what it was. It was a white Batmobile,
and he had the Michael Keaton Batmobile,
mm-hmm.
and he had ballistic missiles, and what else did he have that was silly?
That car was driving through like pillars and stuff too, and not even getting damaged. I mean, it was driving through bricks and walls.
It
and
was
everything.
standing gunfire.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole city was blowing up around them. Not a scratch, not a dent was put on that car.
And I guess there's something to be said about how he like is like this tech baron, like you said, but bullshit.
Yes.
Just don't have a car. They really weren't cars.
That's another point that I'd like to make.
The tank that, again, Avengers ripped off, because that's the same intro. Red Skull did the same exact shit, was pull up in a tank and steal something. And that's what they did in this movie. But tanks, I feel like tanks should have happened before cars, because like it's like one tread wheel. Like it seems easier than a tire to me for some reason.
I don't know if that's accurate.
I don't know how anything works. So
we're not mechanics. We're doing a podcast.
But that I'm willing to. But they had tanks less than 20 years later in World War I. So, but they had cars too, but like not like this one.
No, and I just want to pose a question. If you want to use missiles and cars and all this shit, why set it in 1899? Why give it the rules of 1899 if you're not going to follow the rules of 1899?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense why they chose that. Because if they chose, even if they chose 1910, so much more developments have been made in technology. I'm willing to suspend more disbelief. Planes are flying around at that point.
As soon as you slap on a 1900s tag, I'm willing to believe it. But this is 1899, so instantly 1899, we're in the 1800s to me.
We are pre-Civil War level technology. This is Napoleonic.
Quartermain chases the Phantom into a cemetery and is incapable of detecting his obvious movement through it, until the two finally come face to face and begin their battle. Though it is relatively evenly matched, Quartermain gets the better of the Phantom, knocking him to the ground, his mask clattering on the cobblestone beside him. It is then Quartermain realizes the gravity of his mistake, as lying before him on the streets of Venice is none other than his own employer, M. It is clear that this conspiracy is unfathomable, and M says as much before making his grand getaway. Quartermain is left in utter shock. That was something that didn't make sense either. Why was the Phantom... They did a big thing to make it so we all were like, oh, it's the Phantom of the Opera. But why not just not do that?
Well, and also the Phantom, he was known for wearing the mask and having all of these burn marks on his face. And then Sean Connery knocks the guy to the ground. The mask falls off. And he sits up and rips the fake, like, latex scars off.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was expecting the Phantom to be scarred. Why did he do that? Why did he add that
Yeah,
extra
he
layer
didn't
of
even need
makeup?
to be scarred. He could have just... He had a mask on.
He had a mask on. This is somebody nobody's ever heard of before. The character doesn't even matter. He's like the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. It's all a ruse. But why sit through hours of makeup if you're just not gonna need it?
And the scarring was only like in segments of the mask that were exposed too. Like he didn't even get a full scar-faced up mask.
And it doesn't make sense if you're gonna wear a mask to cover your scars. Why have scars outside of your mask? As this transpires, Dorian Gray enters the Nautilus, pops a cap in one of the crewmates, and audibly admits to being the saboteur all along, clearing the Invisible Man's name before hopping on an escape pod with a bunch of stuff and peacing out.
The crewmate that he shoots, isn't that Ishmael?
They give him a name just to throw another book reference in, but yes, that is Ishmael from Moby Dick. And also, can we talk about the escape pod for a second?
Yeah, the escape pod mechanics made zero sense to me as well.
Once again, we are not mechanics. We are podcast dudes. But this thing didn't make any sense. It looked like it was supposed to face one way and the propeller on the back was supposed to be the propeller on the back.
Yeah, it looked like it was supposed to do one thing and then it instead did another thing.
It looked kind of like the head of a sunflower and the petals
were
spun.
the propellers.
But instead of the head of the sunflower moving forward, the flower sat sideways in the water.
Yeah, kind of like General Grievous's trike thing that he rides.
Exactly, but without the other half.
Yeah.
Just the one side.
It was really bizarre.
Watch the movie. You're going to be like, what? You're going to be like, huh? You're going to be like, what?
Leaving a vinyl record detailing their evil plan, M and Dorian Gray reveal that they are using belongings of several members of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, including Mina's blood, Jekyll's potions, and the Invisible Man's skin cells. They plan to make an army of clones, stealing Nemo's blueprints and future plans to construct massive weapons of war.
Okay, this is the point of the movie where I started to be upset. And I'm going to ask why. If all he needed for his master plan was the skin cells, was the blood, was the serum, was the blueprints, why the hell did he assemble the team?
Yeah.
Why not go to each one of them individually? They did everything he said when he asked nicely.
Why didn't he assemble the team and just ask for those things and then send them all the way across the earth to do nonsense?
Yeah, and like looking back on it, when they showed up, when they go to Dorian Gray's house and they get ambushed, clearly that was the plan all along, was to take them there and get what they wanted from them, I guess was the plan. But why create a team? Why create camaraderie? And why create people that are going to be your enemies? Like you said, I mean, how big are the mosquitoes in Africa? Couldn't they have just released one and having... Well, no, I guess they didn't need Sean Connery's blood. They didn't need anything from him. Why get him?
Yeah.
They didn't need anything from Sean Connery. They didn't need anything from Tom Sawyer.
They didn't need anything in Africa. I mean,
It
if they
was
got him
stupid.
and then went to Africa to get him out of Africa, that would have made more sense. They rounded up a few people that were not needed.
This guy is supposed to be an evil genius, and his plan has zero logic. Why get him?
He's doing way too much.
He's doing way too much. And he could have... Okay, so Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde go to Paris, offer the amnesty, get him on board just a normal boat, and steal the serum.
Or just break into his house and steal it when he's the giant monster. They knew where he was.
They did know exactly where to go to get him. As far as Mina Harker is concerned, she cut her finger instantly. She can bleed. So they could
her and Dorian Gray were banging. If Dorian Gray's a bad guy, he could have just got some blood from her.
Like he did on the
Like
boat.
he did.
And then as far as the skin cells go, the Invisible Man was the first one there. He was the first guy that he
recruited.
got. It was just silly. It made me so mad for the rest of the movie thinking about it, and I couldn't talk to you about it because I wanted to save it for the microphones. But like, what the fuck? That was the worst plan I've ever seen.
It didn't make any sense. And also, the Invisible Man, he's only invisible when he's naked the whole movie.
Yeah, unless he doesn't want to be. I mean, even when he's wearing the coat, he is naked.
He's naked underneath the coat. And then the guys later, when they take his DNA and give other people the invisibility, those guys are fighting naked.
Yeah, there's a lot of nudity in that movie. The crew, now in shambles, must pick up the pieces of their failures and find the villains and foil them once and for all. Luckily, one of these extraordinary gentlemen happens to be one step ahead. The Invisible Man, the person everyone accused of being a villain, was able to sneak on board the escape pod alongside Dorian Gray and telegraph their whereabouts to the heroes. He's naked. He's naked on the pod next to Dorian Gray.
Yeah, he's hiding naked next to Dorian Gray.
Book accurate, Dorian Gray might not have been opposed to it.
After enduring a series of bombs that nearly sunk the ship, Jekyll and Hyde get on the same page and can be trusted, and the crew makes their way to the Arctic to find the lair of their employer, M. Suiting up, loading their guns, and getting ready to rumble, the crew infiltrates the lair, starts blowing up shit, and sending bullets everywhere. Yeah, Hyde saves them.
Yeah, there's a scene because Dorian Gray, among all of his other sabotage activity, left bombs in the submarine, and the Nautilus is sinking in like the Mariana Trench. It's going way down, and
you get to see how unheroly these people are because Nemo seals off a door to says we have to think about the greater good and lets his whole crew die.
Yeah,
but Hyde saves them.
Not Dr. Jekyll.
Mr. Hyde saves them. But Nemo was like, we have to think about the greater good. Seal the door. And all these people are drowning trying to get to the door. And he's like, close that shit. Can't deal with it.
It was really dark.
It was. And then Hyde saves everybody.
And also there's a couple scenes in between here. The Invisible Man walks for miles in the Arctic snow completely nude.
Yeah.
And as soon as he gets to the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he sexually assaults Mina Harker.
Yes.
It was supposed to be played off as like a joke. Sean Connery was like, "Oh, come on, get a grip, man," and he was like, "Oh, I already did." I already did, mate. It was insanity, and that was humor. That was 2003 humor.
Mm-hmm.
It still kills. It is an epic showdown, and they come face to face with some of the creations of M, with new invisible men, a giant Mr. Hyde, and classic machine gun-toting jabronis. The League fight with all that they have, dispatching their enemies, with Mina Harker having a sensual battle with her ex-lover, Dorian Gray. There are some dirty puns as they fight, with Dorian assuming he has gotten the best of the vampire. That is until he is stabbed with a sword through a wall. But due to his invulnerability, this isn't too worrying for him. But when Mina finds a covered portrait on the floor, Dorian is overcome with fear. Ripping the cover from the painting and showing its owner, the portrait of Dorian Gray renders the man into a pile of writhing dust, killing him instantly.
Avengers ripped all this off too because M's secret laboratory has like big metal guys in big metal suits with flamethrower hands.
Captain America.
They have all sorts of weapons. It looks just like Hydra.
Yeah, he basically is Hydra.
Yeah.
Wants to take over the world.
It's even in the mountain, just like Hydra was.
Didn't he want super soldiers too, like Captain America?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he's doing. That's what
Red
doing.
Skull was the original superhuman serum guy.
That's right, he was. That is right. But no, I'm glad that we finally got some true book accurate depictions of Dorian Gray here. Not necessarily revolving around his romantic interests, but the portrait. His powers were actually really creative and cool. I'll give them that too. Like their interpretation of the portrait of Dorian Gray, with having him, he can get shot, he can get stabbed. Nothing can hurt him because it all goes to the portrait. So it was really cool to have him finally see it like the
one cool
source
thing
material.
they did.
The only cool thing they did with Dorian Gray.
Dr. Jekyll and Captain Nemo fight a man who drank way too much of the Jekyll serum, creating a 12-foot-tall freak monster that nearly gets the best of them. Quartermain gets into yet another fight with M, who reveals that he's actually Professor Moriarty, a famous villain. The fight is violent and Quartermain nearly beheads him with an axe. But before he can, he realizes that Tom Sawyer, a man who he now considers like a son, has been captured by a new, evil Invisible Man. As he turns to shoot the Invisible Man, Moriarty stabs him in the back with a knife and glides like Batman out of the window. With the lesson from earlier about British shooting, Tom Sawyer takes aim and fires one shot at Moriarty, vanquishing him before he can get away and cause more mayhem. His briefcase full of blues and evil plans falls into the Arctic Ocean, never to be seen again.
In the wake of their success, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen must also endure a great deal of pain. They each sport their own new scars, with the Invisible Man being burned nearly to death at one point, and Mina Harker getting stabbed repeatedly. But the greatest pain they feel is from the loss of their dear friend, Alan Quartermain, who dies from his injuries.
Taken back to the land of Africa, he is buried beside his son. The crew ventures off into the world, but not before Tom Sawyer leaves his American gun on Quartermain's grave. As they leave, a storm begins to brew as a witch doctor chants nearby. For, as they say, the land of Africa will never let Alan Quartermain die. A real quote from earlier. Lightning rips across the sky, and just before the dirt begins to move, signifying his return to life, we cut to credits.
Man, oh man, oh man. That is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's rather extraordinary. I think that with some fine-tuning in the right hands, that movie would not have been so bad.
They just expected so much of their audience.
They expected us to read several novels.
A lot of books.
A lot of books. And I know that the Marvel movies, you're expected to like be familiar with comic book characters. But
not really. They cover it. They made the movies.
I've never heard of Alan Quartermain, and he's the hero.
I'd never heard of Dorian Gray or any of those characters. I don't read shit.
I don't read nothing. I go to movies.
I knew Tom Sawyer because that's like a classic.
So are all of these technically.
Oh, yeah,
that's
maybe
a classic piece of American literature.
Yeah.
Also, what was Tom Sawyer? What was he spying on? He's an American special agent and a spy.
I never once saw him report back. Isn't that what spies are supposed to do?
Yeah, and then at the end of it, he's just like, yeah, I'm going with you dudes.
Yeah, what the fuck?
It was all so dumb. And they didn't follow any of the rules that they set out to make for these characters. They didn't do anything. And I feel like there was a lot of gruesome deaths, even involving some of the people that were supposed to be part of the team. But they never followed through. None of the main characters died.
Except Alan Quartermain.
But, at the same time...
But... he doesn't die.
He doesn't die. The land of Africa will never let him die. The movie ends with a shaman chanting and lightning cracking across the sky.
And the cliffhanger.
Guys, this movie was supposed to have a sequel.
And a sequel we're bringing you today.
Oh, get ready. Buckle your seatbelts, which probably weren't invented in 1899, because we're going on an action-packed joyride of second installment glory, folks. Rhett, what have we cooked up today? What is this story? What is it called?
We have for you today The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen 2, Back from the Dead.
We open on the dark, quiet streets of London. Night has fallen, the taverns are emptying, and a woman walks alone. It is the poor side of town. The cops are nowhere to be seen as this woman makes her way through the solitary streets. The scary howl of a dog can be heard as she steps over a faded street flyer, a flyer warning of a menace known as Jack the Ripper. As she walks, she begins to hear the sound of feet behind her, followed by the dancing of shadows in a nigh alley. Suddenly, she turns to see a nearby man waving his hands frantically beneath a lamppost, the hat on his head casting a shadow on his face, making him indiscernible. As she looks to him in fear and confusion, two large gray hands, each one covered in a multitude of scars, grab her from the dark and pull her within the shadows as she screams into the night.
Across the country, in the forests of Wales, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is a mid-adventure, in which they are clearly setting a trap. Mina Harker walks by herself down the lonely road holding a lantern. She is observed through the scope of a rifle, the possessor of this gun being none other than Tom Sawyer. Accompanied by Nemo holding a spyglass of his own, the two discuss the creature that they plan to lure out. The howl of a wolf can be heard and the thumping of feet. Finally, emerging from the darkness is the legendary Wolfman. It is quite the battle. The other members of the League jump from the trees in an action-packed ambush. The Wolfman, who is taller than Mr. Hyde with ferocious, blood-stained fangs, attempts to rip into his enemies. They all make certain not to be bitten by the contagious creature. Finally, Sawyer pulls his revolver, which is loaded with a single silver bullet, blasting the werewolf in the heart. With one final howl, the creature falls to the forest floor, undergoing a farewell transformation into Lawrence Talbot before dying in the night. The crew make their way back to the town that the beast had been terrorizing, and they are met with a stellar party. This party, however, is cut tragically short by a telegram from a London detective by the name of Sherlock Holmes, begging them to return to the city due to a horrifying new terror plaguing the land. The League climbs aboard the Nautilus and sets sail to London.
At the crime scene, the crew, some police, and Sherlock Holmes, played by Daniel Kaluuya, look at the body of the woman from the film's opening scene. She is pale and partially clothed. Holmes reveals the scarring and stitchwork on her stomach, noting that she is missing some of her internal organs. The police regard this as some maniac. Holmes, however, isn't sold on the notion. Though this so-called Jack the Ripper is clearly some sort of sick freak, the detective believes that there is more at stake. With the steady hand and precision of the back alley surgeries, this has to be a trained professional. Holmes would have half a mind to accuse his old nemesis, Professor Moriarty, had he not been vanquished by the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in the previous film. With the crew on the case, they begin piecing together the string of murders, as well as analyzing another troubling situation in the surrounding areas.
Though grave robberies occur from time to time on account of petty thieves trying to make a buck, there has been a massive influx in cemetery disturbances of late. Not only are possessions and pieces of jewelry stolen from the caskets, but entire bodies have gone missing as well. Their loved ones left in agony as the police attempt to figure out a prevention strategy. Victims of this crime wonder who could be committing such a vile act. A flash of lightning cracks across the sky and we cut to a graveyard. Two men tear into the earth with shovels, one much taller than the other. Covered by hoods and capes, their identities remain hidden. However, the scarred gray hands attached to the taller man seem eerily familiar. Ripping open the casket, the smaller man slaps the big one on the shoulder.
Hey, grab the body. Boss is gonna like this tasty treat.
The large man grabs the carcass from its resting place, and the two sneak into the night.
Across town in Sherlock Holmes' Office of Detectivery, the new home base for the League, they continue their investigation. In order to gain a better perspective, they decide to infiltrate the community that has been most frequently targeted by Jack the Ripper: sex workers. Finding working girls, pimps, and trying to get to the bottom of their clientele, they bump into a rather out-of-place customer. Only 16 years old, wearing a red hunter's cap, and sporting an American accent, a young man by the name of Holden Caulfield is questioned by the League. Having only been denied service by the hookers, this want-to-be John has a pessimistic attitude on life, calling the League a bunch of phonies and trying to escape them several times. Determining that it is unsafe to leave this unaccompanied minor on the streets of Whitechapel, the crew earns one more member. Receiving word that another grave has been robbed across town, they make their way to the cemetery. What they find is shocking.
With every single grave in this cemetery exhumed, the disturbed dirt reveals empty casket after empty casket. Looking at this horror, Captain Nemo, a known worshipper of death, whispers that bodies are not meant to leave their eternal resting place, to which a familiar voice replies,
"Sometimes it may come in handy."
Spinning around, partially frightened and ready for action, they look upon the white beard of their old friend Alan Quatermain. It is a moment of wonder and glory amongst sorrow and gloom, and the resurrection of Quartermain seems to resurrect the spirits of the League. With his expert tracking abilities, Quartermain is able to recreate the scene that took place the night before, explaining that there are at least 2 sets of footprints, meaning that Jack the Ripper has an accomplice.
Back in Whitechapel, another body has been found, and they make their way to the scene of the crime. This body has undergone far more surgeries than the others. Their trusty medical examiner, a man by the name of Victor, played by Jude Law, declares that whoever is behind this must not only have a background in science, but is no doubt one of the most prevalent scientific minds in the city. A witch hunt begins, and the academics are rounded up for questioning. One of them happens to be a man by the name of Selby Wells, a scientist who claims to have invented a functioning time machine. Though it is clear that he is not capable of the crimes, they employ his services for a wild experiment.
In order to prevent the crime and find the killers, they decide to get one step ahead of Jack the Ripper by taking a step back, using the time machine to go back to the events of a crime. Perhaps they can find the killer and his accomplice, and come back to the future with the evidence to convict.
It's a hard decision, with each member of the group volunteering their services for the mission. However, due to the instability of the machine, Alan Quartermain decides that he is the man for the job. After all, he is the only one who has beaten death once before. Entering the time machine, Quartermain is sent back in time to the opening scene of the movie, following the woman in the dark. Walking past the howling dog, he clocks a shadow move through an alley near the woman. Identifying that this shall be her demise, Quartermain runs beneath the light of a street lamp, waving his hands wildly to get her attention, to save her. The woman looks to him in horror just before 2 large hands pull her into the dark. Her muffled screams quickly silence as 2 yellow eyes glare at Quartermain from the darkness.
In hot pursuit, Quartermain follows Jack the Ripper through the alleys of London, ducking beneath clotheslines, jumping over makeshift latrine rivers, until finally he rounds a corner and is knocked to the ground, hard.
Gasping for air on the cobblestone street, Quartermain looks up to see a monster. Standing freakishly tall with large bolts in his neck and stitching all over his face, piecing together a hellish tapestry of skin, the monster looks down at him with rage, the woman from the opening scene dead in his arms. The monster approaches Quartermain seemingly ready to kill, that is until a light turns on in a window nearby. A series of hellos ring through the streets as concerned citizens begin to wait.
It's a Jack the Ripper.
The monster, now clearly afraid, drops the body and takes off into the night. All that is left is Quartermain beside the dead body of a young woman. It doesn't look good.
Just before the constables arrive, Quartermain regains his breath and his footing, and makes his way back to the time machine, opening the door and returning home. Returning to the present and swinging the door open, Quartermain charges into the office of Detective Ree and says,
Jack the Ripper is no man. He's a...
Before he can finish his declaration, he sees his friend and the detective tied up and held hostage. A hunchback holds a gun and chuckles. This is Igor, played by James Buckley, and standing in the corner of the room is the beast from the alley.
Monster.
Quartermain finishes, looking into the...
He finishes.
Quartermain finishes, looking into the creature's sad. Should we change that line?
Maybe just Quartermain says.
Quartermain says, looking into the...
Now it's different for me. Monster. Monster.
Quartermain says, looking into the creature's sad, yellow eyes. From around the corner, holding the scientist at gunpoint, Victor, the medical examiner, reveals who he is. There is no Jack the Ripper, only Victor Frankenstein, and thankfully, his pet monster was able to give an accurate depiction of Alan Quartermain, giving the villains a several-day head start.
With a few maniacal laughs, the theft of the time machine and its creator, and a complimentary bullet into Captain Nemo's heart, Victor, Igor, and the monster board the Nautilus and take off to their hidden fortress in Bavaria. Captain Nemo dies before their very eyes, and there's nothing they can do to save him. Crying out in agony, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen seem to have failed the world once more. However, before the Nautilus can take off, Holden Caulfield, who has been living in the submarine, is able to turn on a tracking device before his new captors put him in shackles.
Being able to track the Nautilus leads the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in the right direction. Thankfully, a man by the name of Phineas Fogg happens to be starting his 80-day world journey. Hijacking his hot air balloon, the crew travels by air to the doctor's laboratory.
The crew make it to Frankenstein's castle lair in Ingolstadt, Germany, a laboratory so wicked and horrifying that the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen are incapable of imagining what it is they are about to face. Not only has Frankenstein created human life, but life of other hellish conjurations. Hybrids of humans and animals are caged in this laboratory, with a deafening howl echoing through the corridors from his children, and their pungent, unnatural stench polluting the air. Frankenstein forces the time traveler to repair his machine, which has sustained malfunctions on Quartermain's return. He imprisons Holden alongside what he refers to as the Beast. After initial fear on Holden's part, he and Frankenstein's monster actually develop a budding friendship from their cages. Holden names him Adam, and the two become buddies with one another.
The League arrives, only to be met with the forces of Dr. Frankenstein. These creatures, mindless and vile, attack the League with everything they have, forcing them to fight for their lives as the Doctor plans his escape, revealing that it would have been years of creation to get an army strong enough to take on the modern world. The time machine has given him all the power he could ever need. Planning to go back in time to a less war-capable chapter of history, Frankenstein and his army of the wretch will take over the world, changing history and giving him all the power he could ever dream of. And, as it all comes crashing down, the League nearly bested by overwhelming forces of evil, it is not one of these extraordinary gentlemen who save the day. Instead, it is an underachieving teenage boy and a monster.
Standing on the precipice of world domination, Frankenstein laughs at his nearly vanquished enemies. Giving one final evil speech before sending himself back in time, Holden clandestinely reaches the device's controls, changing the destination from the past to the far, far future. With a subtle nod to his buddy Adam, Frankenstein's monster breaks free of his chains and throws the Doctor into the machine and sends him into the future.
Landing in a murky swampland, the time machine sputters into materialization. Clearly damaged from the jump, Frankenstein jumps out, enraged and defeated. Wondering where he is, he suddenly sees the shadows of people coming towards him in the darkness. Suspecting them to be past humans, he introduces himself as Dr. Frankenstein. However, his title is lost on these inhabitants, as they are not people, but monsters known as Morlocks. Tearing into his flesh with their teeth and claws, Frankenstein is ripped apart, but unlike his victims, nobody intends to sew him back together.
In the present, the crew endures some bittersweet emotions. On one hand, they have just saved the world, again. However, on the other, they have lost their friend forever. With hopes of using the now missing time machine to bring him back, they begin to plan a funeral for the famous Captain Nemo. However, Adam reminds them where it is they are standing, and about the very nature of his existence. Revealing that this is the place that brought him from the dead, he believes that perhaps it will do the same for Nemo. Strapping the captain on the table, connecting bolts into his neck, and firing electricity into his corpse, Nemo writhes and shakes until finally he is reanimated. It is a joyous moment for the whole crew, and they rejoice in their victory.
The farewells are quite a sad affair. As they pat Holden on the head and send him back to America, it is an especially emotional goodbye between he and his new friend Adam. Holden asks, "Where will you go?" To which Quartermain replies,
"Where do you think, my boy? With a man so extraordinary, it is only right that he joins our league."
Adam is accepted into the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, as well as the Time Traveler and Sherlock Holmes. Dramatic music plays and they all begin to ride off into the sunset. That is, until they hear a report of a large white whale terrorizing the seven seas. Changing course, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen sets off to their next grand adventure. Scene. Speaking of scene,
Do we have one for you?
we know we shouldn't have, but we've also taken the liberty to write a scene of League of Extraordinary 2.
Don't worry about it. It's not
Back from the
that big
dead.
of a deal.
It's not that big of a deal. Interior, Frankenstein's laboratory, night. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen fight with everything they have. The mobs upon mobs of Frankenstein's children swarm around them. Mr. Hyde throws a wild punch at the unrelenting masses as a dog with human skin latches its jaws upon his forearm. The Invisible Man, who wields a sword, is so covered in blood that his crimson silhouette can be seen slashing into hordes of enemies. Tom Sawyer and Alan Quartermain stand back to back, each one firing their revolvers into charging abominations. Mina Harker attempts to avoid capture, transforming into her bat form, only to be chased by freakish humans with featherless wings. Dr. Frankenstein stands at the top of a tower, waiting for the time traveler to fix his machine. The time traveler has a chain around his neck and is held on a leash by Frankenstein's monster, aka Adam. Climbing the stairs, blood soaking into his mustache, is Sherlock Holmes.
"Oh, hello, detective. Are you feeling at home? Soon the entire world will be overrun with my creations."
That's not what I deduced.
Sherlock Holmes lets out a mighty bellow, charging at the doctor. The two throw punch after punch at one another. At first it seems like an even fight, as the two hammer away at each other. However, it becomes clear that Frankenstein is gaining the upper hand. In the castle below, so too do the monsters. Mr. Hyde's serum begins to wear off, transforming back into Dr. Jekyll. He locks himself in a cage in order to avoid his doom. Mounds of creatures swarm around him, their claws and fangs reaching towards him as he cowers in the fetal position on the cage floor. The Invisible Man is picked up by a winged beast and thrown through a stained glass window of the castle. The snow falls as he hangs onto the outside of the castle wall, sharp rocks awaiting him hundreds of feet below. Two gunmen run out of ammunition and are overrun with creatures. Mina Harker is thrown into a vat of embalming fluid, the creature holding her down and attempting to drown her. Bubbles dance past her fangs as she tries to break free. Frankenstein knocks Holmes to the floor, kicking him hard in the chin.
Did you really think you could stop me? Stop what I've created? The world is dying, Detective. I'm the only one capable of bringing it back to life.
The time machine turns on as the creator makes the final repair.
Oh, Bully, my ride is ready.
Frankenstein stands in the threshold of the time machine.
Look one last time upon your sickening creations, your society of doubt and filth, for soon they will be a distant memory. I am the harbinger of glory, the resurrectionist, and I will sew back together the broken pieces of this world.
As Frankenstein continues his rant, Holden Caulfield sneaks through the window of the tower. He reaches for the control panel of the machine, switching the date from 1330 to the year 10,069.
Nice.
Holden turns to his friend, Adam, and gives him a nod. The monster returns the gesture and drops the chain.
Creature, what are you doing?
Adam lets out a mighty roar as he throws a punch into the doctor's chest, knocking him backwards into the machine. Gasping for air and holding his diaphragm in agony, Frankenstein attempts to escape the machine. Adam slams the door and Holden pulls a lever, starting it up. Frankenstein gives one final scream as a portal opens up, swallowing the machine and sending him into the future. The creatures, seeing that their master has been bested, let out a screech of fear. Releasing their captives and rushing out of the door, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen live through the horrors of Frankenstein's lab. Cut to exterior swamp, 10,069. Time machine rips into frame, the portal spitting it out into a nasty bog. Pieces of the machine are ripped from the hull during the voyage, and Frankenstein pushes the door open, still holding his chest.
Oh, you bloody fools, you...
Frankenstein looks around, realizing that he is no longer in his laboratory. He looks in the darkness for a moment before rushing to the time machine's control panel. Repeatedly pulling the lever and attempting to start the machine, the snap of a twig in the darkness can be heard. The doctor jumps, looking out into the void before him.
Hello?
Suddenly, within the shadows, the outline of something can be seen moving in his direction.
Oh, thank goodness. I was afraid I was all alone out here. Hello, my name is Dr. Victor Frankenstein, and I...
As the shadows get closer, it becomes clear that whatever is approaching is strong in number. Finally, emerging from the darkness, it is revealed that these are not people, but Morlocks. With green skin and silver hair, these quasi-humans charge Frankenstein. Biting into his flesh, pulling his arms, Frankenstein is torn limb from limb.
Oh no, please stop, it hurts, oh no, mercy, mercy.
Screaming in agony in the middle of the swamp, Dr. Frankenstein is no more. Cut to interior Frankenstein's laboratory, present. There is an eerie silence in the laboratory as the League pulls themselves together. Coming to the center of the castle, they look to one another, downtrodden.
Where's the machine?
Holden and the time traveler shake their heads. There is a hopelessness in the room.
So, we just can't bring Nemo back? Unless an African shaman is hiding around that corner, I'd say that we've lost our friend forever. We should arrange to have his body returned to his homeland. Or should we return it to the sea?
As they speak, Adam leaves their downtrodden circle. Holden takes notice.
Where are you going?
Holden begins to follow, but Sherlock Holmes puts a hand on his shoulder.
Let him go, child. He is to blame for this after all. It's not his fault. Adam didn't ask to be born. Tell me, son. Did any of us?
Holden brushes off Holmes's hand and rushes outside after his friend.
Adam?
He looks around to the snow-covered German courtside. Adam is nowhere to be seen.
Adam!
Adam comes from around the corner, holding the body of Captain Nemo in his arms.
What are you doing?
I have taken so much life. Perhaps it's time I give some
back.
The two rush into the castle and to the operation chamber of Frankenstein's laboratory.
Scene.
Scene.
So there you have it, folks. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 2, Back from the Dead. A lot of themes of resurrection, of second chances in this film, which is something that I believe the first one should have been given.
A resurrection?
Just a second chance.
Yes, I agree.
Another shot.
Apparently Disney might be rebooting League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, it's a common theme. We start to do all this research, all this work for these episodes, and then we realize they're actually making sequels.
That's great.
It is wonderful. It's great news. We hope
I loved League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I had a blast watching League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, in spite of its many flaws.
I had a blast coming up with a sequel for it too.
I will say, there's a lot of scenes in the original movie that I kept track of. There's at least 4 scenes where they're fighting in libraries.
Yes, there are.
In the opening scene, a tank rolls through one. The fight with at Dorian Gray's house, there's bullets being shot through them. A library gets set on fire, and many people would argue that this is a symbol for what the movie did, destroying a whole bunch of books.
And that's what the movie did do.
But I don't know. I think that there's a shot with this. I think that the attempt was to breathe new life into characters long forgotten because we don't read. I don't read.
I don't read
You
shit.
want to read a book?
No.
How about instead we take these characters and turn them into superheroes? And I just think it was before its time. I will say it's crazy. It's crazy that this movie was made before a single Marvel movie.
Was it made before every Marvel movie? Besides Blade.
Besides Blade.
Blade is like an adaptation. It's like it's not a shot for shot. It's not a remake. It's not like a Marvel movie.
The literature Avengers came before the Marvel Avengers. There was not like a superhero
you mean like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen came before the Avengers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was a wild ride. We hope you guys enjoyed our second installment.
You have been with the Brower Brothers. I hope you enjoyed our movie. Tune in for the next episode when we review and write a sequel to another movie.
And you guys, pretty soon here, we're gonna want we're gonna want your opinion. So if you ever have a show, a movie that you think deserves a sequel, reach out. Let us know.
Peace.